Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome back to On the Clock. I am Caleb, obviously, and today I am joined by another one of my good friends and buddies over at No Ceilings. Today I'm joined again by my brother, Stephen Gillaspie. How are we doing, Stephen?
Man, Caleb, I'm awesome. This has been quite the task nailing down this episode today, but everything is all worth it at the end, man.
Yeah,
Good things come to those that wait. The best things in life you got to work for, and I'm excited to get going on this episode with you, man.
I think I even DM'd you and said I'm patient. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
um,
Um, like Jason Voorhees, right? You just keep walking. Eventually, you get to where you need to go.
yeah, and I mean this we had talked earlier on in the season, like almost I mean, it was more than a month and a half ago at least, but obviously a lot has changed. Kind of in the college basketball landscape. I mean, I think we had three unbeaten teams at the time when we spoke
Yeah.
still. So now obviously a lot's changed. Some teams have surged to the front, others, some team that we'll talk about a couple times or at least once and here has kind of stayed and remained at the top.
Yep.
But it's been fun. I mean, I haven't had an episode up in, a bit, but it's been just more about school than anything, not really about the basketball stuff. I've been able to still keep up and my big board's updating constantly. I've been putting some of those up on Twitter and will continue to do so. So, I got my top 100 and um, I kind of want to gauge where you're at in the process. Are you feeling how many players are you feeling sure about? Like I feel like in this class there's like
Ooh.
it's like 13 to 22. I think most people would probably be out where they're like, these guys and in 3 years, if you're getting graded, how many guys are you saying are in the NBA still? And at least like a minutes, I mean getting minutes in the league.
Oh, how many guys? So, all right, I'm gonna address that because to me, I pulled like two different questions out of that. The first one, I'm feeling pretty comfortable with probably like prospects 1 through about 20. Actually, I would say like 28, 29, somewhere in that neighborhood. I'm almost like solidified in my first round. But out of prospects who I think are going to like stick around in the NBA, so to speak, I'm feeling really good at about like the 22, 23 mark. I love this draft class. I know that, the more that we analyze the same players over and over, like you'll start hearing that like, oh, well, this class wasn't as good as I thought it was. I just think that we need to remember why we fell in love with this class to begin with, right? Like we got generational talent up at the top. There have been players that have outperformed their draft stock. There have been players that underperformed, but I think the number of players that have stepped up and kind of taken the draft community by storm, I think has been a pleasant surprise. I'm just enthralled with the quality of this class at the top. I think that there's really good players outside of the lottery. I think nailing down a top 14 has been harder than what I initially thought it was going to be coming into this class. I'm thrilled to death with just the process that we're getting to now, and with the tournaments and March Madness starting to kick up, we're going to start hearing about some lower end names that haven't been discussed throughout the year from like people who love the NBA and saying, well, how come Caleb Love isn't a first round pick, or how come Armando Bacot isn't a first round pick, like how we had to listen to last season. There's going to be more names that pop up that we're going to be kind of forced to pay extra attention to.
Yeah, I feel like a name that kind of could be in that mix is somebody like hmm I had a name
I
but
would say like Adam Flagler and LJ
yeah,
Cryer are kind of prime
I was
candidates
thinking like
to
Tyrese
take it.
Hunter, but I mean he kind of had that last year.
Yeah,
But a guard of that kind of mold normally does well. Like
yeah,
Max Abmas early on, anybody who
yeah.
can get streaky shooting early on. But this class at the top of it, I feel like, you know, we've gotten into this like new age analytics era of scouting, like 6'7" ball is kind of what I'm gonna start calling it, is where
Yeah,
kind of your aggregate and average height is 6'7" across the board.
yeah, that long
Give it
ball. Yeah,
give or take a couple inches at each position, make up for it with wingspan. But um the thing that I'm just enjoying is like the wing talent and like not just like the shooting guards and small forwards, but like kind of some of like the new age like power forward wing. kind of a guy who can space the floor and kind of is like an inside out scorer.
Yep.
It's been really fun to watch, and there's a lot of different variations of it, kind of usually scattered. And I think we have three of them, kind of starting right off the top, kind of getting into some of these guys. Um, the first one I want to highlight is Kyle Filipowski, for Duke,
Mhm.
the freshman, 6'11" forward. He maybe didn't start the year how I expected. Like, I think a lot of people were anticipating him. He kind of his expectations changed throughout the year, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. You know what I mean? I think coming into the year, a lot of people were as myself, when I say a lot of people, I was expecting him to shoot a lot better from three. I think that I expected him to be a little bit more of a more prominent post up threat. But I think with that, he's shown a lot of other abilities to play kind of more of a wing position, closer to like a Lowry Markkinen, that we see with Utah. And I'll kind of open up the floor to you. There's a lot of stats that I'll get into and bring up throughout the conversation that can highlight how really rare this season has been for kind of a freshman. He's just been awesome. So I have him as we can maybe get into the board talk later, but I may or may
Sure.
not have him in my lottery.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. I'll go ahead and give you now. I have him at 39. And it's crazy, right? We were
Oh,
actually
not
kind of
crazy, but
pulling behind the curtain for the No Ceilings group chat. We talk all the time, and we're always saying like, why is this player better than this player? Or if you're buying into this guy, why? And if you do buy into that guy, should you not have him higher than some of these other prospects, right? So with Filipowski, if his shot has not been there, like to the level that a lot of people were kind of hoping and anticipating. And like you mentioned, I think his role kind of changed. I think he kind of had to be more of a play finisher this year than a connector, because I know a lot of people were kind of talking about the playmaking hasn't been to the level that we were kind of anticipating, but it hasn't been there for a lot of people that do. Like Dariq Whitehead has missed time. Derek Lively was essentially a zero on offense for a long part of this season. Now he's starting to hit these 3-point shots that everyone was kind of hoping to see at the beginning of the year. Tyrese Proctor, kind of waxing and waning throughout the year. Jeremy Roach is like the offensive engine on this team. So there's just a number of players, Mark Mitchell, another guy on this team who I believe is playing out of position to open things up for Filipowski. But the expectations has shifted because this team is just not where we thought it was going to be at the
yeah.
beginning of the year. And with Filipowski, if you're not buying the shot, then what value is he bringing to your team? Is I think that there is value into him, and that's why I kind of have him like in that priority second round range, right? Because the things that he can do at his height, it's just not a lot of dudes can do, and if the shot is there and he can play make and he can rebound, and the defense just also is not where it needs to be, in my opinion, for his position, which kind of limits the ceiling, so to speak, for probably being a five for the majority of his career in the NBA as the strength comes around. So I don't know. I have him as an early second because the shot hasn't been there. We haven't seen enough of everything else, but Duke just might be a program this year to where everybody looks better as soon as they move on from that university.
So, yeah, I'll pick up right where you left off, and I think my argument, or not really an argument, but my case for Filipowski would probably begin with the fact that I think he'd probably be shooting a lot better if he was playing with teammates that were more geared towards playmaking, like in a proficient manner, not in a volume manner. Just his shot quality has been good, but I mean, it's not of like the expectation that you would have for
Yeah.
maybe your standard like 6'11" player that you're kind of like you said, a play finisher. He's not really getting to finish plays. He's having to create some of them himself. I mean, for a guy whose usage is higher than almost anybody that we're looking at, his usage
Yeah.
is higher than Jalen Wilson as a freshman. I'm just, I wouldn't be as worried about, the 3-point, percentage. I would be happy that maybe he's getting up this volume. I think that having that in his shot diet is good. And I think, getting in the gym that way. Some of the positives that I see, I think he's been excellent transition. That was something coming into the year that I knew he was going to be able to do. His ability to put the ball on the floor, I think, is something that's
Yeah.
underrated. His obviously the playmaking maybe hasn't been great, but could be the same argument, that we started with is, if his teammates aren't able to create good shots for him, then, maybe they're not able to knock down some of these shots that other people are expecting them to. Um, that's kind of my case on offense. I think he's just, like you said, going to be a much better player once he leaves. Kind of like, Cat was not really like a shooter at all. Like Kentucky didn't utilize him correctly. I'm not comparing the two in any means play style wise, but just that type of small misuse could make a player look good. Where Kyle, there's only I think I had it. There was only one other guy on kind of the usage, the offensive rating with the rebounding. Kind of, I just ran a Bartovic query, and
Yeah.
in the time span, I think that goes to like 2008 or whatever. The only other
Yeah, it
player
does.
that kind of matched his stat line was Orlando Robinson for Fresno State last year. So,
Who
um,
went undrafted, right?
yeah,
So I mean, that's kind
so
of yeah,
it's valid, but I mean, that's without putting in really much of the context with the fact that Filipowski was also a really highly touted high school player. And, I'm not one for the good high school players are, sure locks to be good players in the NBA, but there is something behind like kind of that old argument where if you really can be a reliable NBA player, you had to have been the best player on your team at some level. That's
yeah,
significant. And he was the best player on his team by far in high school. In fact, he was one of the best 18-year-olds in the world. And he was a gold medalist, and he was the dominant force behind that team with Grady Dick. I mean, um, I don't know. I look at him and I say this is a guy who, it's a very much a fit thing. I think when you look at some of these other players that we have, you can kind of the way that they play, you can kind of toss them on any roster. I think a team is going to fall in love with Filipowski's like versatility. A team like maybe Utah, if they have a pick, a team like Utah, team like Detroit that just need players that are going to come in, have size, and can maybe do a little bit of different stuff. Kyle Anderson, like the flip flop, maybe, better offense than defense, but, a guy who can come in and, give you a slight positive on one end and maybe is like average on the other, play make a little bit, shoot a little bit as he gets better. Because, I mean, the defense, I said at the beginning of the year to Rucker, we were on a pod talking about Duke, and I said that his point of attack defense, I think, is, pretty solid. He's synergy
is
defense.
that going to be his? Is that
Point
going to be
guard.
what's asked of him to do in the
I think
NBA?
he can
Is
guard
like going to
fours.
go guard
Fours.
the
I,
best guards in the NBA?
I think you can play him at the four and he can switch on to twos for moments. And I think that's where he kind of matches up defensively. And then offense, I mean, you can play five out with the guy on there and you can have him, get in the high post and make easy reads, maybe run some handoff. I mean, interior defense is not terrible. Obviously, the blocks aren't anywhere near where you'd want anybody who's 6'11", but I
Yeah,
mean, it's 79th percentile in pick and roll defense. I mean, if you watch some of the film, he's okay at reading some of those passes when it's not the highest quality pass over the top. They're trying to get the quick dump off. He can tip a pass out. There's a guy that we'll talk about later on that Duke squad that's much better at some of those
yeah,
nuances of pick and roll defense than him. But spot up defense hasn't been terrible. 72nd percentile. I don't know. I none of
yeah,
the statistics tell me that he's going to be a good defender, but they tell me that at some point in his career he could at least possibly be average.
well,
And
and
if the
that
offense gets there, I mean that to me is maybe a top 20 talent. I think maybe I'm a little bullish on a lottery pick, but I think maybe he's around the middle-ish 20s. I think you probably see him on my next board after this conversation. And depending on how they play, I mean, they're
yeah,
playing tonight against Miami.
yeah.
And I mean, I can chuck that game while if you have anything left on the Filipowski train.
Yeah, I think that at his position, the defense has to be
Oh, he just made
there.
a jumper, by the way.
I mean, it's he's
I love him.
capable. I mean, yeah, I mean he's listen. I'm not
I
sitting
hear
here
you.
saying that he's a bad player, right? But and it's in we can talk about how he's doing in college, and like there are players that produce in college that never sniffed the NBA, right? Because of how their
Anthony
games
Bennett.
translate. Yeah, right. So I mean, I think that there is a pathway for him to succeed, but I don't buy into him um to the same level as a lot of other people because the shot he can make them. Like he's taking them. That's the first step in making them, is to take them, right? But the consistency hasn't been there. Now, if he's getting set up by the best playmakers in the world, that we might see that percentage jump up. But again, at that position, that the defensive liability that he could be, like, as much as we look at Lowry Markkinen, and he's an all-star, in the city that he plays in this year, is a great story, right? Uh he was a role player in Cleveland, right? And Utah, like, obviously had a high usage, high role for him, and could be creative because of what they saw him do in world play, right? So
Mhm.
not everybody is going to be looking to bring in that play. It took a very specific type of team situation for Larry Markkinen to eventually become the player that the Chicago Bulls hoped he would be. So he moved two teams on before he could get a shot, and he was the top 10 pick. So Kyle Filipowski probably being a late first round pick at the earliest, I would imagine, the opportunities aren't going to be there, right? So we talk all the time about, only 20 to 25 players succeed in a draft class in the NBA. So being able to see the floor, you have to bring something to the table. At his position, some of the skills that he has are going to be intriguing for a lot of teams, but that might have to happen within the confines of a safe environment, like in practice, before a team is just like, all right, we drafted you 27, let's see what we got, especially if it's a competitive team.
Yeah,
And then
I mean,
again,
if
at his
anything,
position defensively, if he's a revolving door, like, what kind of confidence is a coach going to have in him
I
to
just
to
don't
put
think
him
it's a
out there?
revolving door on defense. I think that he can guard. I think that he can guard the 4 and the 5 confidently, and he can switch out even onto twos momentarily. And I'd say it makes him fairly versatile, even if it's not the most consistent.
I don't know. Like, I don't think that what we see from his position in the ACC is like the best type of sample that we could assess for how, like, the types of players that he would be guarding in the NBA, right? Like, there are talented big men in the ACC, but he's not seeing them on like that consistent of a basis. Like, there's a difference between going up against Armando Bacot like maybe twice a year compared to going up against the other talented big men in the NBA. Like, even a
Yeah,
Jared
in
Allen
person.
probably going to give him fits, right? So, and then if he's playing the big spot, he's going to have threes and twos and threes, like, going at him, like, in the paint the entire time. And,
He's
like,
6'11". He's
well,
gonna
I
be
mean, but defense, the way it's allowed to be played in college, is different in the pros, right? Like, we see 150-point games apiece in the NBA. So, like, he's going to be officiated differently too whenever he makes the
yeah.
jump from playing at Duke to playing on Portland or wherever he goes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear you on that. And like I said, I think it for the argument that you made, maybe not be on the same like level of where we're at, but
Hmm.
I think we're both preaching to the same thing, that it'd have to be a fit thing. It'd have to be a scenario where the team has a plan, like
Yeah.
what Utah had with bringing in Larry Markkinen, for him even to be a solid role player. And I think we both agree on that. But
Yeah.
I think that there could be something there. I think 20s is maybe the high range where I think most people will have them, but I think some team could fall in love with them. But
For sure. I mean,
take them.
it just takes one team, right?
Yeah,
Like, it just takes one.
I think he's had a good enough year, and has the opportunities still left available to still make that case for himself too in the tournament, which is a good thing. As long as I mean, I don't know. I think they could win tonight, send them to the final. There's 54 seconds left in the game. Um, Duke is up 80-76. So exciting stuff.
Yeah. And his matchup in this game is either like a six
No
seven,
Chad
six
O'Meara.
eight
I mean, if
Jordan Norchad O'Meara or Jordan Miller. Like,
yeah,
that's his assignment right now.
yeah. And so I mean, it should be easy pickings. And I think it
Yeah.
was he had um 17, 10, and 5 on 8 of 9 and 1 for 2 from 3.
Yeah. No, he
Solid.
can,
I mean,
like, he has games where he's very
lively at 3
productive.
blocks. Another big lively blocks game, but he's playing against midgets, like you said.
I wouldn't go so far as to say midgets, but
Yeah, I don't
definitely
know if that's politically
an
correct.
undersized yet scrappy Miami team.
Yeah. I like Omer. I think he's fun. Just
Oh yeah.
Julian was very high on him early on in the season. Had him second round, early second.
It's nice to have favorites, man. Like, and anybody can go in a second round, it feels like, you know.
Yeah, and speaking of one of my favorites, kind of early on in the season, we spoke about Trayce Jackson Davis.
Yes, sir.
And this is one of my guys that going back to last year, I remember listening to a pod episode. I think it was Draft Deeper. I can't remember if you were on it or not. You could have
If it
been.
was around January timeframe, that's when I came on. So
Yeah, you were definitely on it then.
yeah.
And you guys were talking about Trayce and
Mhm.
kind of the all the little things that he can do. And I mean, his game has just exploded and blossomed this year.
Yeah.
I think into the most complete version of himself that he really could be at the college level. I'm just gonna let you go because I could talk for a while, and I'll pick it up where you leave it.
Yeah, so I mean, I could too. TJD is also, I would say, one of my guys. So like that's a shared affinity that we have. This is where we're friends again, right? Like
Yes.
separate from the Filipowski discussion. I too love TJD, man. And you talk about like how he went back to the combine last year. He didn't really get a chance to play because he came down with an illness, but when he was preparing, he worked on his guard skills, like all the stuff that he like all the drills and training that he went under was mostly for guards, and that has translated significantly this year. I mean, the improved playmaking at his position has just been phenomenal. You know, like now, even though that the shot hasn't been displayed, and that's the one thing everybody wants to pick him apart for. And just real quick, I think that when we analyze prospects, we want to see every player at every position do all of the same types of skills. Like is it really to me? It's not that big of a deal that Trayce Jackson Davis doesn't shoot threes. Like it's okay if you have one guy in your rotation that is around the rim because you can play four out. Like, is it preferred that you play five out? Sure, but like there are a number of NBA teams that run a four out system with an interior finisher, and they do just fine. So I think TJD not being a jump shooter like everybody has like kind of crazily demanded him to be while ignoring like the interior finishing, the screening, the rebounding, the crazy defensive and rim protection ability, and then the improvements in the playmaking. So I think that that leap that he has shown as a facilitator helps him out a lot more because he can be much more connective. And if you look at the way that Indiana uses him, I think that an NBA team is going to kind of look at what he's being used as now and say, okay, like let's run you through some horn sets and some DHO actions. Let's
Yeah,
see
I
if
mean
we
he's a
can.
perfect off the bench center or power forward. Anybody that can play in the paint. I mean, not to interrupt, but I think he'd be so perfect pairing him next to a stretch big. Like I
Yeah,
think that he fits perfectly in a role like that off the somebody's bench or even coming in to play with a starting unit. Like I mean, I
yeah.
picture him with like the Suns. If he came off the bench for the Suns, I mean,
I mean, they play Biombo. I mean,
if he was
TJD
on the
can.
Suns right now, I would bet on the Suns right now to win the championship.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing that Trayce Jackson Davis. We're not saying that he is super talented enough to turn any team into a contender, right? But
I'm
the
saying he's
reason that
that
I
guy over the top.
Yeah, like he's a guy that you put on a team who's a winner for one, like and has NBA pedigree coaching and Mike Woodson and is like the epitome of a leader, right? So if you're not walking in day one as the man in the NBA, or you're not walking in as like a tertiary playmaker in the NBA, you have to be a consummate professional. You have to have the work ethic. You have to have the likability and the personality on top of the skill set at your position, right? Requisite to being able to see the floor. In TJD, is he 6'10"? Is he 6'11", 7 foot? No. Like, is he 6'8", 6'9"? Yes. But he's strong as a brick, and he can, like I said, he sets really good screens, which will free up your best player. He rebounds, which will also help on the defensive end, on top of the shot blocking that he
And
provides.
offensively, his rebound offensive rebound is great. His putbacks are excellent.
Absolutely. And then you look at the fact that he's grown as a playmaker. Like you can have offensive sets to where you can trust him to make a couple dribbles on the deck and find the open man and keep the play moving. Like it's subtle little things like that, like making passes out of short roll, like subtle little things like that at his position that is going to make TJD. And then if you look at the Bartorvik analytical queries, like they're insane. Like
Yeah,
he's doing things that like multi-year NBA players do. And if you feel like a guy, I credit my co-host Maxwell Baumbach for this line of thinking. I love it. If you think a guy is going to be in the NBA for a long time, and like take him in the first round, like just draft the dude at 24, 25, because at that point it's not really a guarantee that you're going to get one of the best players in the draft anyway. So take a guy who's going to be a contributor on in the league for a long time. Like you can do that with Trayce Jackson Davis.
yeah. I think with this one's pretty safe to talk about where you maybe have him at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
Overall,
have him. I have him 24 right now.
I have him 27.
Yeah,
Um,
which I mean, we're
I have him
watching the same
below
dude at that
Lively
point.
and Kobe Jones.
I have. You said Kobe Jones.
Kobe Jones and Derek Lively.
Okay, yeah, I have Kobe Jones at 22. I have Derek Lively at like 35, 36, I want to say.
Check out this bullish Slauson take. 22. I'm right ahead of Maxwell Lewis and behind Bryce Sensabaugh.
Man, bless your heart. You know, I know that Adam Spinell at the boxing one, I think, has a late first round grade on Slauson too.
He's
I
so
love him.
fun. I
Like
love
he's
his
one of my
defense.
favorite players.
His
He's one of my
defense.
favorite players in the class. I don't have him in my top 60. I mean, that very well could change. He's like knocking on the door. I would say that he's like if if he doesn't get drafted, he should be one of the first onside free agents, like in free agency.
Yeah, we'll definitely see him in summer league.
Yeah.
I
And I
mean,
think that
just
he can
after
I think that he can impress in
his
a lot of
shooting,
venues.
I'm telling you, if you put in an individual workout, once they get that kid's wingspan and his vertical, I'm telling you, it's over. He's going in the first round. Like he's gonna be
Well,
the last guys in the first round or early second. I think I would
I could see it.
I can hear an early second and I'll believe it because I think he would probably be a team's good second first round pick, like an Isaiah Livers type move. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like
Yeah, that makes sense.
take a bet on this guy. Be like, you know what I mean? Good locker room guy. Good family. Well spoken
Yeah.
kid. Everybody talks just raves about his work in the gym and him as a teammate. Passing, all that stuff's excellent. I think you can make the same argument, but then some for a guy like Trayce Jackson Davis. I think that those type of players are, they're hard not to be your favorite guys. Shout out Ty Rogers at Illinois. It'll be your time next year, buddy.
Yeah.
Next year will be your time. Be having these conversations about him. Um, I know we will. We will, Steven. I promise you.
Okay. I'm here for it.
Yeah, Jalen Wilson, another guy that at the beginning of the year I was very, high on. I had him as like a middle first round guy at some point. I just think a lot of the sophomores and some of the other freshmen like Noah Clowney and other guys like that have been playing really well and have shown flashes of potentially being buys in the first round. I think he slipped into the early second on my board. But he still had a fabulous year for Kansas. If I'm not mistaken, they're playing tonight as well. Um, yeah, they're playing Iowa State, or that game might have just wrapped up. Alabama beat Mississippi State. Got to keep up. It's hard to keep up, with all the quarterfinals,
Yeah.
semifinals.
There it feels like a game's happening every 20 minutes.
Yeah, Marcus Sasser dropped 30 tonight.
Yeah, he scored half of Houston's points. Ridiculous.
That's epic. I'm gonna have to go watch that game back. Missouri beat Tennessee.
Yeah, I saw that too, my boy.
Yo, Tigers.
I watched them play
The
against
boy
Georgia.
Hodge,
Yep.
26.
Demoy and Kobe both had great games.
They're excellent. They've been awesome. UConn lost to Marquette.
Yeah, it was a tough game. OMP was going off. He gave Jordan Hawkins fits.
Kolek had a good game. That's dope to see.
Yeah.
He's a great player. I got to meet him I went to Marquette. He was at a event that I was at. It was so cool. He was a really
Yeah.
nice guy. He has an excellent basketball IQ. Talking basketball with him was great. Okay, Jalen Wilson had 25 and 10 tonight. Okay, look at that. We're on a good little streak of these
Yeah,
players playing
you
well. We're
You
looking
got
very
a nice
smart.
list of guys, man.
Um, so Jalen Wilson, back to kind of what we're talking about. Obviously, Kansas got the dub tonight. I don't think anybody was expecting anything different against Iowa State. Moving on to the Big 12 final, they're taking on Baylor. Yeah,
Yeah,
Baylor. So Baylor, Kansas, both teams that I would think
another
are
game. Yeah,
unseen. They get to run it back again, and kind of talking about Joe Wilson's game, very similar to Trayce Jackson Davis, honestly, is a lot of the growth that he's made has been kind of in that playmaking department. He was a solid
yeah.
3-and-D guy. It was anticipated that this was going to be kind of the guy that filled the Ochai Agbaji role. And he's a little bit of a different player.
Yeah.
Still, a decent shooter, maybe hasn't been shooting as well from deep as a lot of people wanted. Obviously, only 33%, but on, crazy high volume. I look more at the 62 makes. And then also, speaking to that jump shot, the improved dribble jumpers, he leapt up to 46.9% on effective field goal for dribble jump shots. He's above 40% from the dribble jumpers from three. A lot of those like small areas, you know, you can pick and choose like some of the analytics and say that there's enough of a picture here, especially with his overall development, to say that he can be a guy that maybe you take a second round swing on. I'm not as sure of him as I was early on in the year. If somebody told me that maybe they weren't, didn't have a draftable grade on him, I could maybe understand it. But
Mm.
I still think that he's an NBA player, though. I think that he'll make his way, either through the G League or something like that. I just think that he's got great basketball IQ. He's a winner. The defensive stuff has been awesome. Um, you know, I like just a lot of the stuff that he can do on the perimeter switching. The wing switching that Kansas can do. Basically with four players on the floor can guard 1 through 3 and 4. And
Hmm.
I think when you look at the NBA and where it's going, I think he projects as a player who can play well in that type of system. And then the offensive stuff, tertiary creator, it's right here. Yeah, I think with early, if a team drafted him and they liked him, got good workout, all these same things that we're saying about a guy maybe like a Jalen Slauson, it's a different case to make, but um, I'm early second round. I don't know. I don't know. Where do you kind of stand? He's been playing really well down the stretch, and I
Yeah.
think he'll continue to play well because that's the type of guy he is. But I don't know where you kind of stand.
Yeah, so I have him like 34 right now, so early second. Um, I kind of worry about like how the role is going to translate because he does a lot of grab and go stuff for Kansas to where he'll end a play on defense and then begin and sometimes even end the play on offense too within a matter of 15 20 seconds. Like
Yeah.
he picks it up on defenses and finishes it up on offense either with a pass or a finish. So the improved jump shooting, again, Maxwell Bombach, lucky to work alongside him. He's a bright dude. He wrote in his Kobe Brown article about like how much should we buy into one season of improved shooting when we have a larger sample size of shooting not necessarily being like the most consistent, right? And I know that there's going to be exceptions to every rule, right? But we just talked about Jalen Slauson as a good example of like one season of just like outstanding shooting when we have a large sample size of the shot not really being there. Kind of the same thing with Jalen Wilson. So it's kind of hard for me to see a guy who's going to be in a much smaller role at the next level, as a floor spacer on a bigger floor with higher levels of competition, being the exact same jump shooter that he is now. So if you're talking about a guy who's going to be like, I don't know, let's be kind and say like 33 to 34, maybe 35% shooting from deep at the next level, probably going to be playing the 3 and the 4, uh, spreading the floor. The defense is going to have to be there because he's going to be guarding literally the best players in the NBA on the wing. So the rebounding is there. I think the level of competition that he's played against is kind of preparing him a little bit for the NBA, but I'm worried about how the role scales down at the next level. I think that if he is a 4, like if he grows strong and is like exclusively a 4, I think there is a pathway there for him to be in the league for a long time. Kind of maybe similar to like a Jay Crowder type role to where he can do a little bit of everything on both sides of the floor. But I think that that's the high end outcome. So I don't know. I just feel good about taking an early second round swing on him as opposed to investing in a first rounder. But I would definitely look at investing draft capital in him at some point in this class.
Yeah, I mean it's after the last couple seasons, it's hard not to want to invest draft capital in Jalen's. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just been that type of way. I mean at 6'8", 225, I like the kind of Jay Crowder comp. I'm pretty sure I have something fairly similar written down. If I do, um, I don't, but it is what it is. That's kind of what I would be thinking is just kind of a do it all. Um, I like the playmaking, like I talked about before. I don't think he's going to be a negative on offense in the sense when he has the ball in his hands. But I do
Yeah.
agree that a lot of his production this year is impressive because of the volume. It's created by
Yeah.
the volume that he's able to shoot. I mean, if you're looking at it on 2K, like the dude's got volume shooter on gold, and he's like, I mean, he's just trying to get to those late shots in the game when his flow's going. And I understand it when a guy's your focal point, especially in college, but it's just gonna be a very different role. If the rebounding can translate, like you kind of mentioned, that could be a path on the defensive side of the ball, and as well as kind of being a scrap.
Rebounding rates are usually a good indication for like the best players in the NBA were if you go back and look at like the Bart Torvik queries, like how everyone likes to do, even
Yeah, I
small
mean
point guards, like
rebounding and
yeah,
effort, man. Those are two things
translates.
that always translate. IQ can be hit or miss, but I mean it's very rare that a guy is a smart player in college is an absolute, dummy in the NBA. Or makes a ton of
It's
mistakes.
usually like the lack of athleticism or positional height that
Yeah,
makes
it's
it more
normally
difficult for him to overcome.
normally something else kind of gets in the way and can turn that, really strong positive to a not as much of a positive.
Yeah,
But I mean those are two things that we don't have to worry about with Wilson or Slauson too. I was about to say Slauson, but both the
yeah,
Jalen's, both the wing Jalen's is IQ, and for Slauson for sure the defense, and I think we'll get the effort from Wilson at the
yeah.
next
Jalen
level.
Hood Shafino is my favorite Jalen in this class this year.
Yeah,
So
I have him. I was very bullish on my last one. I have him at 13 right now.
I have him 9, and I'm entertaining him over Emin Thompson
I had
if
him
I
over
can
a
be so
men. I
bold.
had him over a men and a star for a second. Um,
Yeah,
and I need to wait and see how he kind of plays against some of these better guards as the tournament gets going. I need to
sure.
see him go up against like a true like NBA shot creator. You know what I mean? And see how he holds up on defense just to be convinced and be like, yeah, I mean, this is something that's safer than a men. Like if I want something that's like literally what I want to get with that.
Yeah.
Kind of that route, the Michael Carter. I mean, it's just got Michael Carter Williams written all over it to me.
Ooh, okay. I
Um,
think he's a better shooter, man. Like he
Oh,
gets
but
to the
I mean,
spots a lot
Michael Carter
easier.
Williams in the mid range and at Syracuse, bro, he's dotting pull
No,
up.
no, no, I'm saying like from
Oh,
distance too.
from distance, yeah, obviously. But I
Well, I
mean,
mean,
the build, IQ,
if
general.
Michael Carter Williams shoots from deep in the NBA, like you're talking a whole nother career for him.
I mean, are we talking about him maybe right now as an MVP candidate? No, I'm playing.
I don't know
I'm
about
playing.
that.
I'm playing. I'm playing. I'm playing. All right. Kind of we were talking about defense. So I'll stick with it. Mark Mitchell is one of my favorite
Yeah,
defenders in this entire class. I felt very lonely on this Mark Mitchell train that I've been on for quite some time. But I know that there's people out there. Most of them are maybe not he's not a guy that I would say that I'm like, oh, first round grade on. But I think this
yeah,
is a really, really quality player that if a team takes a bet on him, I have an early second run grade on him. I think that if a team takes a bet on him early, like we were talking about with Slauson in terms of, if there's an alternative to a Slauson, and let's say I'm in, this is called the war room, but let's say I'm
sure.
in the war room and Steven, your reason to me behind not taking Jalen Slauson at 31, let's say I'm Utah and I want a defending wing who can also maybe play the four, and I want to be able to at least hope that he could shoot it a little bit at some point in his career. And my options I would give you right now, and if I would probably be at that point, is probably Mark Mitchell or Jalen Slauson, maybe Jalen Wilson. Out of all those guys, if I'm taking a swing and I'm saying that I want to take a bet for the future, I might end up with Mark Mitchell after that conversation because of some of the things that he's displayed to me, at least. Um, you know, we'll start right away with maybe the most glaring thing is the lack of 3-point shooting volume, but he is
Yeah,
shooting 39%. So it's tough to argue with the results when they go in. They go in
What's his free throw number? I'm not trying to bait you. I genuinely
75.
okay.
So he's been shooting okay. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just not what I was. It's not what I've been was expecting him out of this year. 40% on spot up 3-point shots.
Yeah.
One
Way
point
better
four
shooter than
five.
I thought he was gonna be
Yeah,
coming into the
the
year.
jumper is just not that bad. He's got a very similar like shot form almost to Jarace Walker. I just feel like he maybe has a little bit less of a hitch in it.
Yeah, and what's crazy to me about Mark Mitchell is like I have over the past I would say like 2 months have really started coming around. Like he might be a guy that if he declares and I have a second round pick that I'm like this dude could be like the best return on investment guy in this class. I mean, he was a player that coming into the year that was getting like first round consideration. And again, like
I
the
had him.
Duke
I had
situation,
5 Dukies first round.
I mean, you're not alone in that thought process. Like that had existed for a while. But I just like the Duke situation is like such a talking point as to like how successful these guys could be. And I think Mark Mitchell playing predominantly the three for Duke, like really speaks to the versatility that he can bring because I look at him as like a pure four in the
Yeah.
NBA, maybe even a small ball five whenever he
Grant,
gets
I
his
mean
grown man
Grant
body in.
Williams. I mean Grant Williams,
Yep.
something
You
like
got
that.
yeah, someone
But I
like
mean,
that who's a
honestly, though,
PJ Washington level.
PJ
Yeah,
Walker,
like
like, but then you look at McDaniels, how he's played.
yeah,
I mean, this is a guy in Mark Mitchell who's got 93rd overall defense. Again, these are synergy numbers. Take them with a grain of salt, but
yeah.
86th percentile isolation defense, 95th percentile handoff defense, and 90th percentile spot up defense. I don't know.
He
Just
moves well. Like that's the thing is like you can
that's
look
what
at
that
numbers
indicates.
and we can talk about like synergy numbers and how they're like any sort of analytic is like pretty accurate on offense, but defense is like it's like more team attributed, which again is really weird because Duke isn't like a great winning team, and until recently, like they're starting to figure stuff out lately.
I kind of look at it as if I imagined like where those plays on the floor happen and you look at it in your
Mm-hmm.
head, it's kind of like their defensive zone that they play almost. So like his is like a spot up, so he guards like the perimeter handoff, so
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
range area in between, and then the isolation, so the mid range to the basket. So he kind of guards basically the whole perimeter, but he can guard it in a vacuum to him. Or
Yeah, but then you
or
got to
so
bake in like helps and rotations and
yeah,
stuff like that, and like
yeah.
how they impact the play, and like if Duke is double teaming the other team's best player and stuff like that, right? So there's a lot of nuance within those numbers, but I hear what you're saying, and I think again athletically, like the fact that Mark Mitchell has shown that he can play on the perimeter defensively in the ACC, if he scales down to being like an NBA four, again maybe a five in some lineup stuff like that, that speaks very highly to me as to the type of role that he can be in the NBA. And again, if I'm a team like Boston, you talked about, Grant Williams, like if I have what 3, 4 second round picks, something like that, why am I not looking at entertaining drafting Mark Mitchell and seeing if I again like he might have the best return on investment in the second round.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight two more things.
Sure.
The playmaking, some of like the brief playmaking stuff. I think that he has a
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
more to go off the dribble than people would anticipate. I think he'll catch people at the next level off guard with his ability to move with the ball, especially laterally. Similar to like a Naquan Tomlin. It's just like something
Okay.
that you just aren't really
Bobby
expecting.
Clinton. Yeah.
Yeah, you just can't really you don't really expect that double cross to come across that quickly
Yeah.
sometimes, or he hits that post spin and he just gets that sweet spot in the floor where it's a spin dunk. Um,
Mhm.
One negative though, the lack of maybe rebounding. I think it's maybe more of a role thing and playing next to Filipowski. I think they have him playing
Yeah.
perimeter too much. But still able to get the 4.3 rebounds. And obviously, I mentioned perimeter defensive metrics, no interior defensive metrics, because like we said, he hasn't really been playing that much near the rim. Where
Out of position.
if
Yeah.
he was playing the four, I mean, we're probably looking at a guy with maybe 1.8 blocks and probably like 1.3 steals versus, zero point 0.7 steals and zero point 0.5 blocks, where he's just probably out of place and doesn't get to a lot of plays that he is used to making an impact on. Um, I had a good Bartova query on this one. I put a good amount of effort into this one. Uh,
Okay.
Offensive rating of over 110. This is all time freshman. Offensive rating over 110, effective field goal percentage over 50, true shooting over 55, offensive rebounding rate over 5, defensive rebounding rate over 12, assist turnover ratio over 0.7, and then over 30% from three with a box plus minus of +4 with 20 dunks. So a little pretty specific.
Very, very, very,
But
very
like it's
detailed
it's it's
query.
it's I wanted to make it so it was a wing player, who's kind of like a play finisher, who can shoot it a little bit with good volume. Only had 8, and it was Zion Williamson, Brandon Miller, Taylor Hendricks, Ben McElmore, Chet Holmgren, Justice Winslow, Jeremy Lamb, and Mark Mitchell.
I mean, yeah, I mean, you can. I love Bart Torvik because you can make anybody look like a rock star if you have the motivation.
Oh,
Like,
just wait. Oh, just wait.
yeah,
Oh,
I know that Andrew's coming, but
his.
you can make anyone look like a rock star on Bart.
I,
Trust me, like I've done it. You
I
know,
think I
like
think the point that more overall with it is that he generally does a lot of things that like he does a lot of things well that players in
yeah,
his position archetype that turn into NBA players do well. And I think that we can agree on the fact that you said it, he moves so well. It's just
yeah,
one of those things. And reaching to one of what one of my colleagues, good colleagues, always says is that Julian always says if a guy, when you watch him on the court, just especially at the college level, and I mean, you can see it clear as day at the high school level. But at the college level, when the difference become when you become like a good scout versus starting to get to on the trend of becoming that like a truly great scout is when you can tell the difference by just looking at a guy. Is he an NBA player or not? Could he move and keep up at that speed? And I think Mark Mitchell clearly does not lack any physical ability. And I think he also has the anticipation. Enough is there. There's enough to
yeah,
unwrap and unpackage and get him in front of, a screen and say, look at these reads that, Jimmy Butler's making off ball. Look at all these fun wing switchable defensive stuff that we can do with you and your physical gifts. And I think a team's gonna, again, with a lot of these guys that we're talking about in this one, it's gonna be about fit at the end of the day. Um, Kind of these next two we'll keep, this one we'll keep the last one pretty brief, but talking about Trey Alexander, one of the more sleeper kind of ultra efficient analytic seasons that we've seen this year. 44% from three on 7.8 attempts per 100, near a 2 assist to turnover ratio, box plus minus of 7. Good usage, good defense. Everything's there kind of with this guy. He's kind of just played way above his stock. I
yeah.
think he's one of those guys that you've been talking about where like even like a Hood Shafino where maybe his stock coming into the year was around like lottery level. Now he's getting into the top 10 where Trey Alexander was maybe second round buzz. I think the smartest of us probably had him maybe towards the second round or at least thought about him as a draftable guy or somebody who could turn into somebody with the flashes that were there last year. But and some of his high school tapes pretty good. He's always just been able to shoot the cover off the ball. And I think looking at some of these younger sophomore guards like a Judah Mintz and some of the other guys, Trey Alexander's looking really nice as one of these again, middle second round swings on a kid who can really just shoot the ball, play defense, and doesn't make mistakes on the offensive end. I like it. I like it as like a swing off guard. Like kind of middle second round. Um, but I think the thing that also could be there is that there's a little bit of the um untapped stuff with the playmaking that he's showing a little bit more lately, I think. Just the ball's been out of Showerman and Kaluma's hands, I think, as the season's been going down the stretch. I've noticed at least. I think they've kind of taken some of the investment out of the Kaluma project, realized that, Nemhard and Kalkbrenner are probably the best way that we're going to win and kind of playing through them. So that kind of opens the door more up for spot up shooters like an Alexander. And but I think in some of those actions with Kalkbrenner, he's been pretty good at getting the ball to him in some really good spots. I can't remember. It was early on in the year and against Arkansas. He had a feed to Kalkbrenner and then got it back. Like it was a pick on the left wing. He brought it middle, dumped it like a little quick bounce back, relocated to the perimeter, got it back, and just made a nice quick, like, got the ball swing to the corner for Shireman. Or I think it was a three, or it was Kaluma for a drive. But just kind of like the ability to kind of move across the offense, play multiple roles on one possession. I think is something that's really fascinating. 93rd percentile off spot up, 76th percentile off the pick and roll with the passes. A lot of fun. The 1.5 steals and blocks per game. I think it's all solid. I don't know if you really have a draftable grade on him at this point, but he's really kind of, it's been hard to keep him off my radar with these other guys like Podzimski, Buffkin, even Kugel's getting up to that point now.
Yeah, I think that players like Trey, they're obviously they pop a lot in college, right? And I would say you can even put Demoy Hodge into that same type of category as like Trey Alexander, where I think Demoy plays a little bit bigger, and I think Trey plays a little bit smaller than being listed at 6'4". Like they're both listed at the same height. I think that Alexander plays smaller, and I think Demoy plays bigger.
So you're
Um,
saying you'd take Demoy over Trey Alexander at this point?
yeah, I would. I would take Demoy over Trey.
I love
And
it.
yeah, so it's really hard with Trey because even if he's like a really good guard defender, right? And like that's really like all he's really going to be able to do at the NBA. I don't want to spend a lot of draft capital on that player, right? Like he's a good shooter. I think there's a lot of really good shooters in this class that have better size than him.
Fair.
And if I'm drafting one guy who's probably going to be and listen, like you could be a really good college defender, but making the jump to the NBA is like a whole nother animal, right? So if I'm expecting the defense to take a hit, um, and really all you're going to be able to do is guard maybe one position on every given night, and you're 6'4" and you're a guard, but you don't have necessarily like a game breaking handle. The passing has been okay, I would say at best. Like he's not like a bad passer, but I wouldn't say that he's like a floor bender by any means or anything like that. I'm kind of worried about players of that position, that size, and that play style, like investing capital into them. Like that's why I even wrote my Demoy Hodge piece, and I was pumping him up, and I was comparing him to guys like D'Anthony Melton is probably like the ultimate end outcome for a guy like Trey Alexander, right? Who where Melton was a better playmaker and is a better athlete. Then we see guys like Patrick Beverly, Gabe Vincent, Corey Joseph was like very end of the first round pick, but that was years and years ago when like play style and size wasn't as big of an an emphasis, right? So I don't know. Like we see guys who succeed who go in the mid late second or undrafted of his size because they can space the floor and play defense, but we also see like way more not work out.
Yeah, I mean everybody like loves to see things like Derek White, but I mean they don't hear about, Jeremy Lamb, for
Yeah,
um
who was had heavily draft stock invested into him and didn't really work out to the level that everybody wanted, and he was bigger than Trey Alexander.
yeah, Dion Waiters. There's a lot of guys who could shoot that never panned out and just didn't get the role. Things didn't line up, which I mean with really every player and every pick almost, except for some players just can't miss. But a guy that I think is can't miss.
Oh, here we go.
um,
Here we go.
I always like to take time on these episodes, as I always say, to show a little love to the little guys, the mid-major guys, more often than not. This one's definitely close to home, and for the season finale, at least at this point of the War Room until definitely probably the conclusion of the college basketball season, as we're kind of just getting in to the time of year where I just like to get my popcorn and kind of just sit and watch basketball and not really have to stress about making podcasts and all this stuff, because at the end of the day, I like getting nitty and gritty with the scouting, and this is a nitty and gritty one.
Yeah,
Like you said before, I'm gonna pull up some egregious Bartovic queries that are gonna really just make you shake your head at me and question my legitimacy. But I'm just gonna start with some of the counting stats. 17 points per game from the freshman, obviously playing for St. Thomas, people can say whatever they will about the Summit League. It's basketball at the Division I level. And you can only play who's in front of you, and we can get down to the competition arguments later. Because it actually just it doesn't really help the argument as much as you think it would, Steven.
I don't know.
3.3 box plus minus, which is kind of just irrelevant. But he's on a team that is kind of on the upward trend. It's their first couple seasons as a D1 program.
Yeah.
They have some young guards that he's playing next to. I think the thing that's important to note is, I mean, he's 18 years old, getting the usage.
And did you drop the name yet?
Oh, Andrew Rohde.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Did I not the whole time?
I don't think that you did. I don't think
Andrew
so.
Rohde. I bet people know. I mean,
Okay, I just want to make sure.
if they've been listening long enough at this point in the pod, they've been here for the Andrew Rohde talk.
Just want to make sure.
Yeah, 28.4 usage. Doing very well. Kind of across the board statistically for St. Thomas. Decent rebounder. Rounding up to 4 rebounds, 4 assists per game. 1.6 steals. Obviously, I think steals is a stat that probably is going to be, you can account to. I'm fine with you want to diminish that because the ball handlers at the Summit League level are just going to be not comparable to a major program, and that's one area where I'll give you it. But 1.59 assist to turnover ratio, maybe not the best competition again, but still takes care of the ball, especially from a freshman who is 6'6", was never really that much of a primary ball handler in high school, was kind of an off-ball shooter. The one thing that hasn't been as thrilling as maybe watching him in high school was, where he shot around 50% from 3. He's shooting in the lower 30% this year. 55 for 166. Obviously it's a lot of attempts, taking more threes than anybody on the study. But I will say that, I mean, 81.8% from the free throw line, not something to kind of buy out on. Just talking offensive metrics, kind of where he stacks up in the country. Again, obviously there's the competition, but 91st percentile in handoffs, 98 percentile and post-ups for a guard. It has that good size, great feel for being able to create down low, especially when he gets mismatches. 80th in transition, 68th pick and roll percentile, including passes, 83rd percentile in spot up defense as well. Again, take with it what you will, but he's been extremely impressive throughout the season and has only gotten better. He has 2 20-point games in his last 2 to round out the season. Was only getting better as the year was going. Kind of looking at him, just this season, comparing him to freshmen across the country against top 100 talent. And kind of looking at guys, the filter that I used was 95 offensive rating, 50% effective field goal, 52% true shooting, at least a 0.5 assist to turnover ratio, and shooting over 40% from 3. And the only guys that were there were Colton Benson for Army, who had 2 games, which is not really a relevant sample size. I think like 5 or 6 games at least. Taylor Hendricks was in 14 games. Obviously, he's a first-round pick. Different class of player than Andrew Rohde at this point. Jackson Pavlovsky for Wofford, another Wisconsin guy. Aiden Mahaney for St. Mary's, who's another freshman guard that I love out there in the West Coast Conference. And then Andrew Rohde for St. Thomas. He's shooting 40% in those games against top 100 competition, which I love to see, on 12.9 attempts per 100. There's small little bits and pieces where, also a funny little thing, his usage in those games increased, as did his minutes per game in the top 100 games versus the rest. And kind of looking at him historically, and then we'll just talk straight ball. But looking at him historically, and this is what we do mean by how egregious some of these Vartova queries can get, because listen to this one. Freshman, 15 games played, offensive rating of 100, effective field goal percentage of 50, assist to turnover ratio of 1.5, 3-point percentage of 30, at least 10 threes per 100, playing at least 60% of minutes. Trae Young, D'Angelo Russell, Tremont Waters, Chris Warren, Kobe White, and Andrew Rohde.
So you have him as a first-round pick, is what you're saying?
I'm saying that I might have him as a top 15 pick.
So he's
I'm
gonna be
not-
a first, like, so
no,
he's lottery.
no.
Okay.
I have him ranked 70th on my board right now. And
Okay.
I and it's not a aggressive 70, I don't believe, but I also don't believe that it's a conservative 70, because I think that around that range is a perfect fit for a guy like this, a guy like, you could talk me easily into a player like a Duthiero. Some of these guys that maybe didn't get as many touches this year, some of these really, really talented freshmen, exceptional athletes, guys like that fit in this like niche class of young player that you want to take a swing on. I don't think Andrew Rohde is that guy that you want to say, maybe if you take this stat profile and slap it on a different player with maybe different measurables, different things they can do, maybe a bit better shooting from three, ideally this year. But I mean, when you add the context of what type of player he has always been, which is an absolute knockdown shooter, then I could say, like, different player, I'm there. I'm with it. I mean, maybe you could talk me into it. John Lovelace, if John Lovelace Jr. has these numbers, I mean, I'm taking John Lovelace Jr. in the second round. I don't care what anybody wants to say about me. To me, Andrew Rohde's not John Lovelace Jr. He doesn't have a 45-inch vertical, or he's not an exceptional athlete. But I think that these type of players are clear guys, to me at least, that can fill a role in the NBA as a backup guard, and somebody who can come off the bench in a 10th or 11th man role. I don't think this year's the year for him. I think that, like you're going to say, and I think you'll probably agree with me, he needs a year or two at a major program, playing against better competition. But I don't think it's something, because I mean, when you make that argument to me, I'll say, well, I can't wait to see him play against better competition and prove everybody the same thing, that he's still a baller, and he's a dog. So the St. Thomas's season's unfortunately over. They lost in the final of the Summit League tournament to Wofford, or no, not Wofford. Who did they lose to? It's on the top of my tongue. It's irrelevant to the point, but you get what I'm saying. I mean,
Yeah.
if there is cases to be made for maybe a guy like a Rohde, and what my kind of channel, podcast, whatever you want to call it, what I like to do is find guys that maybe are a year out from when anybody would want to talk about him. And I think this is probably a guy that's 2 years out from when anybody will think about talking about him. But I'm gonna have that conversation now, so that when I look back and I can at least learn something from the statements that I made publicly, or the things that I'm committed to about how I feel about the evaluation, which is, this kid's an exceptional basketball player. If you take him and put him at another university, in 2 years he's at least your sixth man, or you're starting off guard, or you're starting point guard. And I think that's a valuable player to look at and talk about, because if somebody is listening to this who's coaching at a small Power 5 school, let's say like Oregon State, let's say Oregon State really, really needs a knockdown shooting guard. I mean, Andrew Rohde is a guy who maybe will be on some of these top teams' radars to bring in as a transfer, because that 3-point shot doesn't pop. It could be something that provides an opportunity for him to even get a higher usage earlier, and maybe is a guy next year for a small program. I don't know. I think there's plenty of routes, and it's one thing that I try to preach as somebody who likes to consider himself a basketball scout. Is that you should never give up on a player, but you also you should look at a player with rose-colored glasses, but know when to take them off, and have like that real moment and be like, this is where this guy at. This is what can happen. But never lose that sense of enjoyment about the game, where you want it to be fun. You want these things that you believe in will happen. And I believe this guy is gonna be something. He'll be a player somewhere. I think he'll be a professional basketball player for the rest of his life, if I could bet on it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know where it will be, but I think he'll be a professional basketball player for the rest of his life, hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna add too much to it. Because I think that you attacked every angle, right? Like in your breakdown. But I mean, if he's gonna be a player, it's not gonna be this year. I think that's where you bake it in now. He goes up to a level of competition. It's not a guarantee that he's going to succeed, right? That's not a guarantee that he's going to fail either, right? So I think he needs to be smart in that instance. I mean, we've seen guys like, Harrison Ingram, at Stanford who was largely considered to be a first round guy, and then comes back this year and like he's not in anybody's top 100 anymore, right? And he's a McDonald's All American, so there are people who scout like way deeper into the weeds and earlier than I do. Um, and I think too that like with Rhodey, he's got a hard road ahead of him. I wouldn't shut the door on him, but like you kind of, I feel like even in your analysis, you kind of baked in like that you can talk about level of competition. I think that because you would acknowledge that that's a fair thing to point out, right? With a lot of
Yeah,
things that he's
absolutely.
doing.
With any basketball player at any level, it's always a fair thing
Yeah.
to talk about.
And then like you even see it to a small degree with like what Baylor Shireman's doing with Creighton this year. Like
Yeah.
not the superstar that he was before, like still a really good player, but like there's players like guys who move up in JUCO like Jay Scrub or Keon Ellis who was, you know, like late draft picks, maybe undrafted and don't do anything and they have like the requisite athleticism and stuff like that where I kind of worry about Rhodey in that regard. So
Yeah, that's fair. And again, I buy all that stuff, and but I also buy into his game, and what he could do at least to a level to get to being a really good college basketball player somewhere at some point. I think he already is a really good college basketball player, in my opinion.
yeah.
So we'll kind of have to see where his career goes, and I'm sure me and you will stay in touch about it. I don't know if I'll ever let you forget about it. But
I'll let you forget about it if it doesn't work out. I won't take a
yeah.
victory lap
I
on an Andrew
appreciate
Rhodey not
I
working.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
I like being dunked on about my failures because it helps. It kind of like builds that type of grit that a scout needs. You know what I mean? Taking your
Sure.
losses. It's like that line in Wolf of Wall Street. I don't ask people to judge me on my winners. I ask them to judge me on my losers because I have so few.
Mm,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. The joking's over. Real talk. I really appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate you working with my schedule and being flexible about it. And it was nice to be able to take the time to get you on as well, even if I had to be a little bit patient for it. It is always worth the wait for you, Stephen. Excellent conversation. I felt like we covered a lot. This is probably going up on Monday. Um,
Okay.
so if there's anything that you want to plug, if you have any writing coming out this week, now's the time. I'll obviously have all the links below, as I always do.
All right. Well, Caleb, yeah, I appreciate you working with me and, you know, hopefully, you understand like how much I enjoy being on the show and doing work with you, man. Like, when you reach out, I do try to be available with, being a husband, being a dad, the work that I do, my day job and scouting wise, I do try to make time to be on anytime someone asks me, I always try to be there. So I appreciate you, always thinking of me. But I had a lot of fun on the show. If everyone's listening on Monday, Draft Deeper has already dropped. You're going to be hearing me and Maxwell. I don't think Nathan's going to be on because we're also doing like Selection Sunday stuff. So, with, No Ceilings and Draft Deeper in particular, we're a 3-man show. We can kind of spread, divide and conquer a little bit. So, if you want to listen to Draft Deeper, it's the podcast that we do over at No Ceilings, on the No Ceilings NBA podcast feed, which you're rocking the swag, and I greatly appreciate that.
Of
But
course.
we're on Blue Wire now, so we're a part of the Blue Wire podcast network. You can just anywhere you get your podcast, go look up No Ceilings NBA, and please subscribe. A review and a ranking goes a long way there. And I'm gonna have a piece that drops on Sunday in which I did what I'm calling scout takes, where I interviewed a few different scouts within the draft community on their thoughts and opinions on Jalen Hood-Schifino, and I keep them anonymous, out of respect for them and their takes. But that's gonna be dropping. So by the time everyone's listening to
Sweet.
this, that'll be yeah. And then I'm calling it scout takes. So
Love it. Scout
yeah,
takes.
scout takes will be available for anyone to read, and my top 100 is going to be on there too. So
Awesome.
that's going to be
I,
snuck in at the end of the article.
I'll be sure to check both of those out as everyone should. I might even just if that will that be out on Monday or is that coming out later that week? You said
That'll be Sunday. So
Sunday.
it'll already be out by the time
Okay,
everyone's
I'll make
listening to
sure. I
this.
think I'll link that in the description because I'm sure that'll be something that people will just want to be able to check out directly. But
And that'd be great. And that'll be over at NoCeilingsNBA.com, where you can
of
get
course,
articles 5, sometimes 6 days a week for free. Like
oh,
anywhere, like you get the breakdowns that you could find anywhere else. Sometimes they're behind a paywall, and we understand that, like, so, people make money to provide and stuff like that. But we pride ourselves on having top tier interviews, takes, thought pieces, big boards, all that stuff, absolutely free at NoCeilingsNBA.com.
What a crew. You guys are just simply one of a kind. I'd say. I think you guys are doing incredible things always. And I was watching I've watched King of the Fourth Quarter on YouTube for my entire like basketball life. I started watching his videos like when I started like 2014, 2015, and he shouted you guys out. It was one of his videos.
Oh, cool.
I was
I'm
like,
gonna have to check that out. You said King of the Fourth Quarter?
yeah, Kenny. It was on his second channel. He was doing he's doing a rebuild right now with the Nets. And he was doing a draft. He was drafting for this draft class, and he ended up getting Grady Dick, maybe GG Jackson, and but I know he took Grady Dick and Jet Howard for sure.
Oh,
And he was looking at your guys' board though. He like had it on there too. It was
oh,
sick.
that's sick.
It was sick.
That's cool.
Yeah. Shout out Kenny if you ever see this, bro.
Yeah, we're gonna have to reach
Man,
out, man. I didn't
man.
know that was a thing. I appreciate you dropping that nugget
Yeah,
for me.
for sure. I mean, I always love seeing you guys get love. I even dropped a comment, I think, too. I said shout out no Suin. So it's always
Heck
a
yeah.
pleasure. I'll let you get on with the rest of your night, as will I. So this has been a good time, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for listening to End if you have. Like, subscribe if you're new. And I will be back soon with more content. This summer is gonna be a fun summer. In between that time when the college basketball season ends and then in between then and the draft, I'm gonna have some crazy stuff coming out. So people need to stay tuned. We're off the clock.